At Tap Commerce, we focus on mobile app retargeting, working with clients across multiple verticals, including gaming, which is one of our biggest verticals, and we work with some of the top gaming developers worldwide, including Gumi, which is why Phil's up here, and we'll do sort of a fireside chat conversation type thing in a few minutes. But before we get into that, I just wanted to go over sort of the state of mobile app engagement and what mobile app retargeting is. So just from the size of this conference and all the conferences about mobile apps and mobile gaming that have started popping up over the last few years, you could tell that there are a ton of apps out there. And that means that it's hard to get the attention of people because people are downloading tons of apps. On average, users are downloading 8.8 apps a month. But if you dig into that number, it actually can get even a little scarier for the heavy app users. And a lot of the game players are those heavy app users, where they could be downloading 5 to 10 apps per week. So it is really hard to get their attention and keep their attention. And if you don't keep their attention, they're not going to come back and play your game. If a user doesn't use your app for 7 days, so if they've been playing your app, then they stop, don't play for 7 days, there's a 60% chance that they will never come back to your game again. Pretty much you've lost them unless you start talking to them again somehow. And for gaming, once again, it could be even more challenging. 22% of gaming apps are used only once. That means if you, for almost a quarter of the people who install your game are going to install it, open it, and never go back to it. So that means all the time and money that you've spent on getting those installs, a lot of that money is sort of going down the drain. So what does this all mean? Well, traditionally, game marketers have focused on this equation, CPI less than or equal to LTV. And it's great. It's easy to remember. It's only 6 letters and a math function thing that some people will understand. But it's really simple. You have some guys in the back room of your company figure out what the LTV, the lifetime value of the average user of your game is. And then you as a marketer just go out and try to buy installs for that value or less. However, because of the issues with engagement and the fact that it's harder and harder to get people to come back to your games, we feel that you as marketers should actually start focusing more on the LTV side of the equation. And that as marketers, you can actually impact the LTV and grow the LTV, which would then allow you to actually have a higher cost per install. And the way you grow LTV is by remarketing and retargeting your users. There's a bunch of different channels you can use for this, and a lot of you are probably using push notifications, email, cross-promotion within your own game network, etc. But another way of doing this is through mobile app retargeting. So what is mobile app retargeting? It is simply the ability to find users of your app while they are using other apps. And the importance of that is the fact that they are in a mobile moment. They are using another app, something they use daily, a newspaper, a weather app, perhaps even another game that shows ads. They're in that mobile moment on their phone doing something that isn't work, isn't email. It's sort of probably their downtime. And then they see an ad, hopefully for your game, and through one click, through deep linking, they could be directed right back to your game and start playing your game again, helping you increase the LTV and increase the engagement in your game. A specific example here is using the awesome Gumi game of Brave Frontier. So, for example, say you are a big Brave Frontier fan, you're one of the top summoners of all of your friends, and you're just playing it incessantly. Maybe you've just started paying in the game, and then life gets in the way. You have a couple busy days at work, your kid gets sick, whatever it is, you just stop playing the game for some reason. We then can find that player. So we could find you while you're playing another game or on another app, on a newspaper, something else. Show you a specific ad that talks to you about where you are in the game, what's going on in the game, and then with a simple button, the Play Now button, click on it through deep linking, bring you back to the app. And part of the power comes through our ability to show very specific ads. As you can see, here's a few examples. We can localize ads so you can show ads in the right language. We can show ads based on the level that people are at, what they've done in the game, what they haven't done in the game and maybe are about to do, or if there's, we can show ads based on those events. So if there's a big boss battle, some sort of sale or offer going on, we could show ads based on that. So it sounds really simple, but it does actually get a little more complicated than that, and that's why we actually brought Phil here. So Phil and I have been working together, I think, for 6 months to a year now, and really have gone through from like a very simple integration to really being deeply integrated and working on some pretty great strategies. So I'd love to just have him tell you about how mobile app retargeting works and how it's worked for Gumi. So thanks for coming, Phil.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I just shared some stats about how consumers are engaging with apps or sometimes not engaging with apps, and sort of this focus, the shift of focus from just looking at CPI to sort of how marketers can increase LTV. Does that resonate with sort of how things have shifted in your role?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of the companies, a lot of old gaming companies, for example, the Kabams, et cetera, those companies tend to separate the operations teams from the marketing teams. And ultimately, what we do at Gumi is, we make sure that operations teams works with marketing. What we've realized is using retargeting, it's really, really good actually to use that to bring users back during certain events. Otherwise, people just may miss it, or they actually may miss a 3-day sale by coming the last day. You want that user coming back as much as possible at the right times. So really, we've changed our mindset to, the marketing is responsible not just for getting the user in the game, but to keep the user in the game along with the game mechanics.
Great. So what are some of the different channels that you use for re-engagement?
For the most part, re-engagement, as a lot of people here may or may not know, Facebook is there, but Facebook is very, very busy. And ultimately it's that it's very difficult to try and actually hit a user outside of Facebook without device data, etc. So we've been working really closely together for the last 6 months, very deeply integrated. A lot of data is sent back and forth to try and engage users, specifically on Tap Commerce. We're at the point where we actually can't spend all our money with you guys.
We're trying. So what do you see as sort of some of the key differentiators between sort of mobile app retargeting, sort of through what we do, maybe through versus push notifications or email marketing?
So, email marketing, for the most part, you can't really control whether or not it gets through to the user. It's up to Google, Gmail or Hotmail or whatever the mail client is, and it usually gets filtered out into spam. And as well as that, you have to spend a lot more effort and a lot more time. Email notifications, push email, we haven't really had a lot of success with. Push notifications are used, obviously, but those are for people who have those turned on. Right. A lot of people turn those off these days. So we're using retargeting to try and hit users who may be on another channel to bring them back when we want them to. Just because it's, the more eyes you get on your game, the better it is as a whole.
So we've been working together for a while, and I'm wondering sort of if you could talk a little about sort of what are your goals for the campaigns that we're running, and sort of how do you make sure that we're hitting those goals for you?
So, one of the core things that we make sure is we make sure everything's measurable. So obviously, you want to have your ads target to the user at a certain time. So you want, for example, you just mentioned banners to have certain events, so that'll hit the user. So that's obviously very important. But things that for goals rather is, we obviously look at long-term revenue. We look at just app engagement as well. How often is the user actually coming back after they click the ad? Just because re-engagement, we view it as almost kind of like an app reinstall in some cases, trying to get the user to come back. So a lot of the data that we send back and forth and a lot of the reports, it really depends on the type of game. But for example, for Brave Frontier is we look at long tail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said like it can actually sometimes take sort of a while for some of the payers to sort of come back. Or
one common metric that a lot of companies are using these days is lift testing. So one of the really, really good measurable things from Tap Commerce is A/B testing. So we're able to actually split out user groups and just don't show ads to some people, just so we can actually calculate how much additional revenue a certain segment of user can generate, so that we can know how to price our advertising appropriately.
Great. You talked about sending us data, which you do, and it's great. And there's a bunch of mobile measurement partners here at the conference. What type of events are you tracking in your games, and how do you leverage that data both internally for you, but also then through partners like Tap Commerce?
Literally almost every event, anything that happens in the game, any action that the user takes, we basically want to track. Obviously the install, which doesn't really concern you guys, but we look at the open purchases, obviously, tutorial completes, level up, etc. And these are all engagement metrics that we measure. So we use those to segment users, and we actually target those appropriately.
Yeah.
So we measure just about anything, everything, literally, to try and segment the user to very minute means.
And do you think the strategies sort of remain the same? Your game is pretty popular worldwide. Do the strategies remain the same, sort of country to country?
No, not at all. For example, there's no point in paying 60 cents for a click in Indonesia. Those users ultimately won't pay out. So that strategy is going to be very, very different than, example, in the U.S. The ad networks are very different, as well as the pricing.
Gotcha. Great. And as far as monetization goes, I mean, whether it's Indonesia where not a lot of people are paying, or even with some of the non-payers in the U.S. and other developed markets, what are some of the approaches that you found to be effective to sort of help convert or drive people down the funnel from non-payer to payer?
I mean, a lot of it is messaging to the user, and a user will eventually pay out if you get them to play your game long enough. So one of the important things that we do is segmentation. Users who don't pay but who have been playing the game, to level 100 or etc. Those are users who are very engaged in the game, and so basically it's, well, they haven't paid so far, but they like the game. You need to give them a message, give them some sort of example sale to really get them to start paying, and once they start paying, it kind of snowballs from there.
Gotcha. Great. And just out of curiosity, quick question to the how many folks in the audience have done mobile app re-engagement advertising? Has anyone else besides my colleagues? Great. So there's a lot of people here who should be doing mobile app re-engagement advertising. Maybe they're a little nervous to take the first step. What would be some of your advice on sort of how to get started thinking about both retaining players in general, but then also specifically with mobile app retargeting?
I mean, to get started, it's pretty easy. I mean, for most mid to large size gaming company, you usually have an MMP, and at that point, it's just literally signing the IO and sending data over to Tap Commerce. Defining segments with Andy is really, really easy. We define users a certain way. Hey, this user is about to leave. Here's his categorization. And at that point, it's just an A/B test. It's if you pay by click, it's cheap. It's like 5 to 10 to 20K over a month. It is a little bit kind of a cost for smaller companies, but if your game's a certain size and you have a certain amount of users, then obviously you should be able to afford at least 5K IO just to try. I didn't actually believe in it. I know Mark was trying to get me to do retargeting for at least 6 months. And it took a little bit to try to understand the measurable actions, but it's actually a very large size of our campaigns right now for our older games.
Cool. And what brought you over the hump to finally convince you?
It's measurable. It's measurable. It's A/B testing, lift testing first to get you started. That's I guess the initial drug.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you think, in terms of the mix between install advertising, retargeting advertising, how do you think that mix is going to sort of shift as sort of installs become more expensive?
I mean, ultimately, I think it depends on the phase of your game. If you have a brand new game, you don't have any users to retarget, it's not going to make any sense. But as your game grows over time and you have more users who uninstall or stop playing the game or maybe leave the game, just inactive on their phone, you want to bring them back. Brave Frontier, for example, it's a huge game. I think we just celebrated like our 10 million download campaign.
Yeah, we had specific ads for that, actually.
Which was fantastic, by the way. So, Brave Frontiers is a very old game. It's about 1.5 years old. So we have a lot of users that we want to bring back. Users who've paid, $30, $40, $50, and we want them to come back. These users have left. You guys have all our data. So it's as the game grows older, it's going to be harder and harder to target new users. Even on Facebook, everyone is throwing money on Facebook, but ultimately, the prices go up, and you have to find a way to reactivate your old users that are still interested in your game. I mean, they played it for a reason in the first place.
Gotcha. Great. Before we open it up to questions, any other sort of final parting thoughts or pieces of advice? If someone came up to you and said, "I want to do this," what do you think?
I would say the one piece of advice I had I would have for people who are interested in retargeting, it's fairly easy to integrate. It actually didn't require any code on our side. People talk about deep linking. Yeah, that's the ideal situation, and it's going to be very difficult to get your dev team to do that for you. It took us 2 or 3 months for me to convince my dev team. But once I showed them the initial results of just even getting users to open the application from the first page, things just went better from there. We can really just grow our LTV, the long tail of the users without actually incurring too much acquisition cost.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah.
And if there are any questions out in the audience, feel free to ask either of us.
Folks, don't be shy. Go ahead, raise your hand. And any questions out there?
Very, very shy.
Very shy.
I guess we were very, very clear.
Oh.
Well, 1 second. Let's get the mic.
So based off the monetization model, because Brave Frontier uses a lot of IAP and a very lucrative gacha system. So for games that, say smaller games that rely more on ads to make their income, do you think at what point is it still viable based on how the game monetizes or not, or when we should opt in or opt out?
Well, so even for games who don't monetize using IAPs, if you're using advertising, you're still getting the user to engage with your application. It's ultimately depends on how well your users are coming back to the game. Because ultimately, when you have a game that has advertising as the main monetization model, when a user clicks on an ad, they go somewhere else, right? But if they come back to the game, they're still playing the game, so they're still providing some sort of value to you. If they eventually stop coming back, but you add a new feature, something like that, even if it's a free feature, they can still generate income for you. So ultimately, it depends on how well your game itself monetizes, no matter how it is.
And then
is it employed across the range of Gumi's games? Because I know there are a bunch of other titles. Or is it currently only in Brave Frontier?
It is going to be applied globally.
Ah, all right. In your experience, has there been a point where the lifetime of the game matters in regards to, the life cycle of the game itself matters in regards to this?
Yes. So games typically, you would think that the lifespan of a game is about 1 year for an RPG of this size. If we're talking Crossy Road, the lifespan is, I don't know what it actually is, maybe 3 or 4 months. But when you add new features, new content, you are investing into the game, and those users, you want to bring them back. So if you're using just regular CPI ads, it's usually companies, if you're using an MMP partner, companies just won't target those old users. They can't, because you're not going to pay out for those users. So it is really important to, I guess, reinvigorate the life cycle of your game. Brave Frontier is very old, for example.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that if you, with Brave Frontier, we're getting the data in that allows us to optimize the campaign to hit your goal. So, if you have a return on ad spend goal, it almost doesn't matter. We'll hit that goal, and we might change some of the ways that we advertise to your users if it's a much older game, and the scale of the campaign might not be able to be as big. But we'll still figure out a way to hit your goal. So it almost you know, for us, we're almost agnostic. As long as we have something that we're like a goal to target, we'll figure out how to do that. And that will, the way we do it will change whether it's an older game, sort of a mid-life cycle game, or even a new game. And we have campaigns running with literally games during their beta programs, all the way out to games that are sort of on the end of their life cycle.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Thanks for the sharing. Another question will be like you mentioned the retargeting, especially your display ads in other type of apps when the user is in mobile moments. So how do you define or how do you decide which apps you should showing the apps or showing the ads for?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the great thing about retargeting is that you don't care as much about the apps that people are in as you care about finding the user of the game that you're advertising for. So we want to find them wherever they are, and we work through the different RTB systems to find the users in whatever app they're in. The point is that most of the apps that are sort of using ads as their monetization method are sort of are apps that sort of you'd be using at a time that you could also be playing the game. So it doesn't really matter as much, like versus like when you're doing installs, like where you show those ads can really matter. Like you really need to think about what publisher. For retargeting, you're just trying to find the user whatever they're doing. So you're really app agnostic.
Can I follow up?
Yeah.
Just to kind of build on that, it's like traditionally when you think of advertising, we're just thinking of, hey, we want to find the right publisher that has the right type of user. But ultimately, is you need to define your user. You need to classify them. So like all of our advertisements are geared toward a specific type of user. So if the user doesn't click on an ad, that the cost for displaying that advertisement is going to start going up, whether it's CPC or CPI, just because the risk goes on to the network. So in order to get the most values, you need to determine what kind of user is going to use your app and how much you're willing to pay for that one user to get them to come back or even just start playing the game. So it's really about customizing for your user, not just customizing for a blank slate, basically.
So what is the premium that you pay for a retargeted CPI versus normal CPI? Like what's the range you have seen?
So it's actually not included in the CPI. It's additional sort of cost where we charge on a CPC basis. So you're paying for clicks that drive people back to your game. Typically they're like quite inexpensive. And it's a lot cheaper to sort of drive people back to your games than it is to get people to install the game in the first place.